We continue to be in this sermon series, Women of the Bible. If you ask me, might be one of the most important themes that I have ever preached. After all, we all come from a mother. It makes me think about my aunt who needs to be empowered now that her husband has died. It makes me think about my mother who leads the 7th Presbyterian Church back home in Colombia. It makes me think about the teachers that form me. It makes me think about the women of this church. It makes me think about the true strength of God and how it is revealed in those that the world consider weak. It's biblical that God uses the cornerstone that was rejected. Our faith has a beginning, and it has been a joy. I'm actually regretting that I only set up this sermon series for 4 weeks. Why? Because there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. And this is just 50% of the ones that I remember. I just couldn't find another picture with really cool graphics. Last week, we talked about Rahab. And we talked about how God uses us the most unlikely of people. If you would like to hear that sermon again, you can find it on our website or on our YouTube account. Today, we're going to talk about Ruth. We're going to talk about how God continues to use the most unusual of circumstances to show His presence in our lives. I would like to invite John Jackson to come forward and lead us into the reading of the portion of the scripture today, of the good news of the day. I recommend that if you haven't done so, that you take the time to read the book of Ruth. If anything else, you need to hear this. It's rather brief, but powerful. So take from here.
This morning we're going to read Ruth chapter 4, verses 1 to 12 in the New Living Translation. Boaz went to the town gate and took a seat there. Just then the family redeemer he had mentioned came by. So Boaz called out to him, "Come over here and sit down, friend. I want to talk to you." So they sat down together. Then Boaz called 10 leaders from the town and asked them to sit as witnesses. And Boaz said to the family redeemer, "You know Naomi, who came back from Moab. She is selling the land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should speak to you about it so that we can redeem it if you wish. If you want the land, then buy it here in the presence of these witnesses. But if you don't want it, let me know right away, because I am next in line to redeem it after you." The man replied, "All right, I'll redeem it." Then Boaz told him, "Of course, your purchase of the land from Naomi also requires that you marry Ruth, the Moab widow. That way she can have children who will carry on her husband's name and keep the land in the family." "Then I can't redeem it," the family redeemer replied, "because this might endanger my own estate. You redeem the land, I cannot do it." Now in those days it was a custom in Israel for anyone transferring a right of purchase to remove his sandal and hand it to the other party. This publicly validated the transaction. So the other family redeemer drew off his sandal as he said to Boaz, "You buy the land." Then Boaz said to the elders and to the crowd standing around, "You are witnesses that today I have bought from Naomi all the property that Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. With the land I've acquired Ruth, the Moab widow of Mahlon, to be my wife. This way she can have a son to carry on the family name of her dead husband and to inherit the family property here in this hometown. You are all witnesses today." Then the elders and the people standing at the gate replied, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make this woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, from whom all the nations of Israel descended. May you prosper in Ephraim and be famous in Bethlehem. And may the Lord give you descendants by this young woman who will be like those of our ancestor Perez and the son of Tamar in Judah." This is the word of the Lord.
Actually, as I was thinking about the response to wonderful piece of Scripture, I was going to say the word inspired by God for us, the children that need to be inspired. For us who are wondering and have doubts. For those of us that love to say, yada, 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 which in Hebrew means, why me? I'm sure that all of you like to do that. Not as dramatic, but I'm sure, in a way, why me? Why now? The most unusual of circumstances. If you paid attention to the book of Ruth, you will know that it doesn't begin with Ruth. It begins with another woman, Naomi. Naomi's married, and then she moves away from Bethlehem because there's a famine in Bethlehem. And so she moves with her husband to another part of the world and becomes an immigrant herself, thinking that in the other world it's going to be better. What she doesn't know is that a nightmare will happen and her husband dies. But that's okay. I have 2 sons. What are the odds that a nightmare strikes again and again and again and again and again and again? Why? Because her 2 sons die. And as you know, if you didn't, please know that in times of Naomi and Ruth, women had no ability to hold property or care for themselves. Yada, 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 I will say. Being raised by a strong woman like my mother, 5'2", and yet I do not mess with her. I just cannot believe that the world was in that way at some point. That women didn't have the power to make their choices or have money of their own. Tragedy, the most unusual of circumstances. When you feel powerless, not only that you might be powerless, I think it's worse when you feel powerless. It is one thing not having the ability to change what's happening to you, but to feel that there is nothing that you can do is much, much worse. It's not in the Bible, but I've heard this quote from the Asian culture that says, look, if you have a problem that has a solution, why would you worry? Just put in action the solution. And yet, if you have a problem that doesn't have a solution, why would you worry? There's nothing you can do. Let it go. Yeah, easier said than done, I would say. But there is nothing worse than feeling powerless. And I'm sure that all of you can relate to a moment in your life where you have feel that the red tape is too long, that the exams that you're waiting are too negative, that the job that you dream of is not within your reach, that the child that you want is yet to be conceived, that the moment that you want to experience something, it is just not feasible. I'm sure that we can all relate to that. Imagine having a husband and your husband dying. Imagine having 2 children and them dying. Wouldn't you feel powerless when you know that by law you cannot make your own decisions? Powerless. It's interesting to me that it was an unfaithful, by the terms of faith, a Moabite, a person from Moab, was the one that wanted to remain faithful. See, Naomi had 2 daughters-in-law. One of them that is not as popular, and the other one that became popular, Ruth. One of them, well, actually, let me take a step back. Can you do a rewind sound for me? All right, so the 2 of them are gathering, and Naomi says, look, I have no sons that I can give you. You have to go back to your town, and hopefully you will find another husband. You're all beautiful, and you have been wonderful daughters-in-laws. I'm sure that faith will be different for you. Just leave me to die, because I will never be able to have a son of my own, and nobody wants to get married to me. And both of them says, no, you have been good. We're going to stay with you. And Naomi presses again, and one of them leaves, and the other one stays. Ruth replied, verse 16, chapter 1, don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people. And say it with me, your God will be my God. How many of you have said that on your vows of marriage? Next time someone says, hey, what should I say in my wedding? Oh, Ruth chapter 1, verse 16. I'm going to make a mental note for myself. Don't ask me to leave you, to turn my back to you. No. How much love, how much loyalty can a person demonstrate than to say, your people will be my people and your God will be my God? That is not something that comes from here. It comes something that comes from here. In Colombia, there is something that we say when 2 people are really attached to each other, and they are bound by something sacred, something that goes beyond words. We say that they are tight like dirt and nail. That's where the image comes, dirt and nail, if you want to understand. And then, as the joke goes, then you have to say who is the tough and who is the dirt. And that's when you play it from each other. But now, in the moment, Naomi and Ruth become dirt and nail. One time, one will be the tough one. The other one will be the one that is coming from the rear. And then they will flip. Why? Because Naomi, realizing that Ruth was going to be like that, she says, okay, let's just go back to my people. Let us go back to Bethlehem. And then you have 2 widows in danger. Going from Moab to Bethlehem is a long journey. And for them to have no man to protect them, women, if you want to laugh, you can. When I say 2 women, 2 poor women, no. If you ask me, I have seen my wife giving birth to 2 sons. I would not be able to do that. I've also seen my wife making tough decisions. And when my sons are crying, guess who is the strong will saying, nope, you're not. And sometimes She caves because they smile at her. And then she becomes stronger each day. There is so much more. I think it's unfair at the core of our institutions of society to say that women are the weak link. They are not. They are both professionals and mothers. They're both supporters and the tendon that makes the bones move. Have you paid attention how many women we have in the staff of the church? Do you think that's a coincidence or a God incidence of the talents and gifts of the church? If you were to say how many more people are in this room, men or women, you know what will that say? Don't count. You can count at the end. I don't want you to stop paying attention because you're counting. Unless you're a woman, and then you can do 2, 3, 5, 10 times at the same time, right? They went back to Bethlehem because they knew that the law of Moses said that widows and orphans were going to be able to take something from the fields, the scraps. They saw each other and they remember that feeling that when 2 or 3 are gathered in God's name, there I am with them. And they decided that they were going to be enough to take on the world. And they saw the fields and they decided, we are going to work on those fields. And they decided that they were both going to be the nail and the dirt. And they were going to be picking up stuff, elements, life together. By now, I should ask you, do you think this is a God incidence? Or do you think that God is guiding Ruth and Naomi to where they needed to be? As a pastor, I have almost 3 years telling you, with God, for God, there are not coincidences, but God incidences, if you look to be faithful to the one that created you. Decency and order. God is a God of decency and order. When everything picks up, please know that I'm jumping a few parts of the story, so let me catch up to it. As Ruth is working, Ruth is a wonderful, hard worker, beautiful woman. All things, the whole package. And as she's working on the fields, there is a man, the owner of the land, that sees her and fell in love with her. At this moment, this not becomes a Hollywood, but this becomes a Colombian telenovela. When Ruth is picking up and she looks beautiful, even though she's sweating, and Boaz is just standing with her, the hard work that she's doing. And then you see Naomi looking at Ruth and looking at Boaz and says, oh, would you look at this? Ah. But there's a hiccup with the plan, as a telenovela will go, if you have ever seen one. Of course, Boaz is not the next in line to get married by law. There is someone else. But there is a way. God provides a way. At this moment, I want you to acknowledge 2 Peter, chapter 3. But you must not forget this one thing, dear friends. A day is like 1,000 years to the Lord, and 1,000 years is like a day. The Lord isn't really being slow about his promise, as some people think. No, he's just being patient for your sake. I say that because I want you to consider Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz. Remember that Naomi was married to the love of her life, and she had 2 wonderful sons that loved her. Naomi was, in a way, cheated by life. to lose her husband in such a way, and then to lose her 2 sons in such a way. In that case, wouldn't you be better? That the world is treating you, that life is treating you? Many of you might say, God, really? But I have been nothing but faithful. The lady next door, she's not as faithful as I am, and nothing bad happens to her. Why me? Why me? Now think about Ruth. Ruth is married to this man that is able to provide. She's now in a family. She is ready to have children and fulfill her duties as a wife in the times of Ruth and Naomi, and her husband dies. Man, am I never going to be in control? First, I was under control of my father. Then I'm in control of my husband. And now, I have no control. Have you ever felt like you have no control in what's going on in your life? Not your job, not your relationships, not your friendships, not your purpose. Or how about Boaz? Do you often feel like him? That you met the one thing that you want the most and it's not for you? That there is something that you feel will be perfect for you, and yet the world tells you, nope, sorry, there's a lot of red tape that you need to cut. Isn't it heartbreaking when you realize that you are not the next in line, but that you have to sit at the end of the line? Ruth was used by God, and everything took time for her sake. God needed for them to understand that a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. That God is in control. Today, would you remember that God is in control of your life? Would you remember that despite perhaps you were on Wednesday at the hospital and now you're here? Wouldn't you find peace to know that God is in control? Ruth gave birth to a son named Obed, and in turn, he had a son named Jesse. And Jesse had a son named David. And David had a son and a family, all the way to Jesus, who fulfilled the promise. A king to be born in the town of Bethlehem, the town of David. As I was reading this thing, I cannot help but wonder, why did David have such a strong faith? Why did David have the willingness to fight a giant? Why did David decided that he was going to take on so much more, that he didn't need the armor from Saul, that he only had God, and that's the only thing that he needed? It makes me think that it was Grandma who taught him to be strong and courageous. I mean, after all, chapter 1, verse 16. Don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. This is what David is telling the Israelites when the Israelites are afraid of the giant. Hey, I will never leave you. Who am I? I am a child of God. Again, church, don't tell God how big your problems are. Tell your problems how big your God is. This is something that we learn from the gospel, but this is something that Ruth is teaching from the Old Testament. Don't give up. Don't quit. Don't take the easy way out, but rest in the knowledge that God is there, right there, being patient for your sake. Amen.